Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you. Whew, we're going to have a doozy of an episode today. Breaking down the Thermal Club Grand Prix.
It's been a doozy of a week on the socials, that's for sure.
Yes.
We've had plenty of fun on there. But whether you loved it, whether you hated it, whether you tolerated it, whether you want them to go back, don't go back, we're going to cover all the angles here on this episode of the podcast.
Plus, we'll have some positive developments on new car designs and, I don't know, any other exciting stories come out of IndyCar world in the last week. Really, that was kind of the other kind of main thing that was interesting.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about new car stuff last week, so we'll kind of do a follow-up that Marshall Pruitt of Racer.com learned. But we start with all things thermal on track. Alex Palou goes back-to-back to start the year. He wins the race. He's won the first two. It was a tire strategy call by Palou and his team to get him the win.
Which it's always been for a long time. Dixon just always seems to get it right? I mean, now
it's Palou.
Now it's Palou. Same team, different driver. Just whatever they choose to do seems to be the right call. And once again, opportunity was there at St. Pete for Andretti with Colton Herta. Opportunity was there at Thermal for McLaren. Neither could close, and Alex Palou takes advantage at both and gets 2 wins to start the season.
Yes, so Alex Palou dominant on track. It was still a good performance by McLaren. Pato O'Ward getting his first pole. This blew me away. First pole since Mid-Ohio 2022.
I was very surprised at that.
I was as well. He looked good, but he was pretty upset to have primary tires to end the race. Christian Lundgaard had a good battle with Palou, but once Palou got by Lundgaard, Pato had been held up by lap traffic. It was game over for Palou to get the win. On track, you had a lot of tire strategy. You had a really good 15 or so final laps. We'll get into the broadcast stuff. But, overall, for an event, excluding the broadcast issue, it was fine, right? Nothing. This isn't like a memorable race we're going to look back on years from now. Granted, most of the races aren't. That's a high bar.
Yeah. Well, look at this one. In terms of passes on track, it had over 3 times as many as St. Pete did. It was over 200, something like that.
The racing on track product was certainly better in terms of movement. Now, we'll get into this, but we had drivers like Will Power who went from the back of the field to finish in 6th? Is that right?
6th, yeah, and started way back.
Yeah,
and started 6th, and same thing with. Joseph Newgarden eventually kind of faded a little bit and finished 13th, but he made a climb up considerably.
And we didn't see it on the broadcast. So I guess let's start with our 3 things. And this one's pretty obvious. The number one takeaway with Thermal is the broadcast issues, right? I think this is a shared thing.
Right. And I feel like, I especially was really strong after. This can't happen. And my thing was maybe even more egregious than being off the air for 12, 13 laps was putting on NASCAR. My thing would be put on last year's Indianapolis 500. They show it all the time.
Yes, it's on FS1 and FS2 all the time.
Just put the Indy 500 on. It was insult to injury to not only could we not watch the IndyCar race, we had to watch NASCAR to wait for it to come back. And I just felt like that, to me, was the bigger issue. Things happen, and that's kind of partly the reason why I don't think IndyCar should go back to thermal, is the infrastructure isn't there to ensure that these issues don't happen. And it's not a track that all of a sudden wants to put in a lot of infrastructure because at the core of it, it's a private track for the uber wealthy.
Now, they've said they'll change the configuration around for the track. Racer.com has a story on that. But that's different from in terms of making it race ready for fans and TV, etc. That's a much different monster. Remember last year, prior to the exhibition, all the chatter was they got to lay all these cables down, right, for getting everything ready for this event, and how's it going to work? And, it did go off essentially without a hitch from a TV and production standpoint.
Done by NBC, though, as opposed to
now.
Fox. So
IMS production, so it's a lot of the same people and equipment. Now, there are new trucks that they're utilizing, which I guess my issue there is if you're using new trucks and you're still working out the kinks, why are you doing that
during
now?
The season?
During the season. Like, is there a way to have, and I understand this is probably getting too into the weeds, and I'm not fully knowledgeable about some of this stuff, but if you have a production truck and it's brand new and you're still working out the kinks, do you maybe bring a backup? Or, I don't know, like, do you find a way to use it for less, I don't want to use the word important, but less, live on-demand? Like, is there a way to do it for something that's a smaller scale?
Well,
I don't know what that would be.
Yeah.
But
and we haven't really heard, too, with the blown... We know it's a blown circuit breaker, but was it because it was overloaded with... was it a series of things overloaded in terms of energy passing through it, coupled with the heat? Was it just the heat? It was just a random bad thing? Who knows? But I feel like there's a series of things that add up that say Thermal can't be a regular season race going forward. I think on track, it was pretty good, I felt. You had a pass for the lead in the final 10, 12 laps. I mean, we always kind of base our scores. Was there a pass late in the race for the lead, for the win? And there was, reasonably late in the race. But it's just a compounding of things. You add the TV rating, which we'll talk about, the lack of fans, the lack of activation there in terms of sponsors, in terms of everything. It all adds up to kind of just look and feel Mickey Mouse. And I think the rating reflected that. I think part of the rating was because of basketball going on and Cup on the same time. But when you look at what, for instance, NHRA got over the weekend, or bowling on Fox
on Saturday afternoon
that beat the IndyCar rating, and there's basketball going on Saturday afternoon. So it's too easy to say, well, it was just because other stuff was going on and was on at the same time, because you look at other things that IndyCar should comfortably beat and they didn't. I think you're looking at an event that just excites no one in terms of tuning in.
And specifically broadcast. So here's my issue with the circuit breaker that overheated. You're in the Palm Desert.
What do you expect?
What do you expect? Exactly. Temperatures around 90 degrees. Like, you need to have fail-safes for this stuff. And previous roles, I've had it where equipment, overheats, and you have solutions. Like, you have a fan with you, or you make sure you stay out of the sun, or you bring a backup because one could overheat for a broadcast. So I think that's the part that it's hard for me to just give them a pass. I understand things happen, but what's the fail-safe for this? You're in the desert. It's hot. I mean, it's dusty. Not like the weather was a secret. Yeah, it's dusty. So what are you doing to make sure to accommodate those weather conditions with your equipment? That's my issue, why I can't just say, oh, it's also... Are we seeing this happen with NASCAR and Formula One and NHRA and et cetera, et cetera? Like, again, I get these things happen. If this happens again, yeah, someone's getting fired probably, right? But happening the first time, it should be a wake-up call.
I understand. I preface this by saying I understand that the production budgets are vastly superior for Formula One than IndyCar, but they go to plenty of desert locations that are dusty, whether it's Abu Dhabi and Jeddah and places like that in the Middle East where this stuff doesn't happen. Okay, now granted, I know that the production budget's exponentially higher,
but those are production budgets. In terms of equipment, we're not talking like a huge gulf between the equipment being used here.
It just can't happen. And you couple that with the low rating, with nobody there. I mean, the feel of people out there, that just, it's not a non-event and doesn't feel like anything. There's no activation from sponsors. There's not even activation from Honda and Chevy, because as Marshall Pruitt pointed out, nobody at Thermal is buying Chevys and Hondas. They're buying Aston Martins and Ferraris and BMWs and Aston Martins. I mean, it's just it's a playground for the uber rich, basically. And I feel like, and that's maybe my big thing too, as I pointed out to you. It just F1. People say, well, look at Formula One. It's elitist. That's what it is. It's always been that. It's been elitist. But IndyCar is supposed to feel like it was for the everyday person.
Well, and one of the selling points is that IndyCar is the most fan-friendly. And there was a note in the Racer mailbag about a fan who went last year and this year. So they pay the $475 for GA. They get their stands, the bleachers that were out in the sun. And that's all. And then they got the paddock.
Yeah.
They didn't get like turns 15 and 16 and other areas that they had access to even last year. So he said, and he's from LA, so it's like this. It's not a stretch for this fan to go out and attend. So right. I guess an issue I have is IndyCar sells itself as being fan friendly, and doing this as an exhibition or spring training or whatever like they've done in the past is one thing. But a points paying race, fans have different expectations. I went into this with an open mind. Tickets were for sale for general fans. Yes, it was expensive, but it included all 3 days. But the way that fan made it sound like you had the paddock and you had your seats. You really couldn't roam around at all like you could the year before. So that's not providing value to your fans. You're not providing access. And because it's capped as it is, like, why would you go there when you can just go to Long Beach and it's way cheaper and a better event? So that's my issue. I came into this event with a very open mind. I mean, you can go back and listen to last week's podcast. I was excited for this race because there were so many unknowns, right? We talked about tire strategy and is it going to race well? Are there going to be passing opportunity? And on track, it was fine. Like it was a solid race. It wasn't spectacular.
Right.
You had about a 15 lap, at the closed spectacular stretch, but overall it was fine. But IndyCar has set itself up here with, and I know we've gotten way out of just focusing on the broadcast, which I'll come back around to, but IndyCar has set itself up here with this event on the schedule where you go from St. Pete, which is one of your premier events on the schedule, to Thermal. First year as a points-paying race, small crowd, no sponsor activation, as you mentioned. You don't have a lot of fans there. There's no buzz or fanfare beyond it being a new event. So you've essentially shook the 8 ball and hoping it was going to work when, from a perception of the series, and I get fans who say, well, the racing on track was fine. Yes, it was fine. But the event itself doesn't meet the standards of what IndyCar should present itself. Yeah, did it look cool in practice sessions? Yes.
And the drone shots, sure. But
absolutely. But on race day, did it look special? No.
No. Even with the drone shots on race day, you kind of look around and you're like, it's just houses. And that's it. Like there's just no feel there.
Now, if you make it
itself as a big event,
if you make it, 15, 20,000 fans, yes,
and allow them to wander around,
yeah, it will improve the event.
But I also feel like that goes against what Thermal wants to be. Like,
correct.
How many of the people paying 7 figures for their houses and the land want thousands of people on site for a race? I think it's just kind of comes back as they just want a private playground and be entertained for a day or for a weekend. I think you and I are both agreeance, like, yeah, more races is better, of course, and 20 is, we always kind of look at that. It'd be great to have 20 races. But if you add Arlington, well, you are adding Arlington, let's say you add a race in Mexico, and they're both going to be raced around this time, I don't think you need Thermal. I don't want Thermal on the schedule as is just to be another race.
Yes.
I don't think that's needed. For a long time, IndyCar had to entertain every single person that was interested in hosting an IndyCar race. It's okay for IndyCar to tell someone, a track or whatever, we're not really interested in a points-paying race here. And I think that one needs to be told to Thermal.
It's also a new era when it comes to hosting races. Previously it used to be, well, the track had to come to you and want to pay the sanctioning agreement. Well, it's different. Now you can just rent the track and have a race. I mean, we've seen that with IndyCar and Iowa Speedway the last few years, right? We're seeing that with the Milwaukee Mile in a partnership with the State Fair Board, which runs the Milwaukee Mile.
Not ideal because you're paying your own money, but...
So you can't tell me, and as Nathan Brown, who has an excellent article kind of detailing all things Thermal on IndyStar and IndyStar.com, saying, you could have been in Mexico City now after seeing, Pato Award and draw all the fans in a Mexico City mall for the Kit Kat promotion. You could have been in Mexico City this year instead of waiting a year. Now you wouldn't have had the local promoter on board, but you could have promoted the event. And look, you can't tell me IndyCar doesn't have, if they're promoting not just the Indy 500, but Detroit, the Indy GP, Iowa doubleheader, Milwaukee, which is down to one race. They promoted Thermal, did they not?
Right. Yep.
What else am I missing? I feel like I'm missing another tracker. I mean, they're essentially promoting half the schedule as is. So that's another factor that I have a tough time, because you had opportunities here, and Nashville. Oh, that's the one they added. So they're essentially promoting half the schedule as it is. So
not to mention the 2 races at Indianapolis.
Yeah, well, I included those.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess my point is with this, you can go out and rent a track. Look, if IndyCar wants to race somewhere on the East Coast, which is badly needed to fill in not just a schedule gap, but also a market gap, they can do that.
Well, wasn't it too, IndyCar could have rented out Texas Motor Speedway?
Yes.
Right? I mean, we've heard conflicting things about Texas is kind of not interested Motor Speedway, but if IndyCar would have.
But if IndyCar wants to say, hey, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to rent the facility and run a race.
IndyCar, you're going to go, do we want to go pay 6 figures to a track to rent their track, or we have somebody over there that wants to pay us 7 figures anyway to rent it? It makes sense financially to go to Thermal.
But again, short-term gain, what's the long-term payout? You lost, and this is where I'm coming back to the broadcast element, which is our first point, but obviously it's really more about the event. You lost 50% of your TV audience from race 1 to race 2. Looking at the
just because of what was going on.
Yeah, there's always going to be something going on. Yes, Cup was on at essentially the same time in March Madness, but you'll have, Long Beach up against the Masters. I mean, There's always another sporting event.
Something.
Control your controllables as best you can, and Fox says they're going to do a better job. Look, they said they can't do a 9 a.m. Eastern or 9 a.m. Pacific race. They can't do Sunday night in prime time because they have primetime shows on. And Fox says, hey, we're going to work on this for year 2. I believe them. I think they'll do a better job working on conflicts.
I'm also not pointing the finger to blame at Fox too much, because they're the ones putting every single race on network for IndyCar this year, okay? So my thing is I'm not looking at Fox going, how could you possibly do this? You scheduled NASCAR at the same time as IndyCar. It's like you realize the favor that Fox is doing, the, quite frankly, shocking favor that frankly, IndyCar doesn't deserve to be on Fox. So I have a hard time blaming Fox, going, how could you possibly do this? Put them at the same time as Cup. I really people talk about momentum early in the season, and not just with dates, but also races. I have a hard time going from St. Pete, that feels like a big event, to Thermal, that doesn't feel like a big event at all. And it's not translated as such on TV because there's so little of people. Then you try to come back and say, hey, look at Long Beach. It's a big event. Can you imagine?
But it's 3 weeks away.
Correct. And I don't know if I have as much problem with that as I do. You have to have big events after a big event. Ideally, it's every other week. But could you imagine a schedule, which hopefully we're there maybe as soon as next year, where you're going St. Pete, then you're going to Arlington, that's going to feel and be a big deal. Then you go to Mexico, that's going to be a big deal. Then you go to Long Beach, that's going to be a big deal. Then you go to Barber, that's been a big deal. Then you go to into May. Like, that is just a schedule full of really big events, big either sustained events or big new events. And I feel like that's what you need. And we talk about the event needing to feel big. Thermal isn't it, for a variety of reasons. And I don't think there's one particular thing that I'll point out and say IndyCar can't go back to Thermal for a points-paying race because, and say one thing. It's a series of things, and I think that's one of them. You start your season off with a bang, and then you have a whimper at Thermal. And then now you expect people, okay, 3 weeks from now, we got a banger at Long Beach. Then you go to Barber. I just feel next year, if you have Arlington and you can add Mexico City, like, you have some bona fide events before you get to Indianapolis.
Yes. And I'm glad you included Barber, because that's, I think, quietly become outside, of course, we're excluding the Indy 500, but your top 5 events, you have Long Beach.
Yeah.
You could, I would say they're number 1, obviously excluding Indy. But then outside that, you could argue Barber, St. Pete, Mid-Ohio, and Road America. Any of those,
right,
in terms of being, in your top 5 events, excluding the Indy 500. And I think Barber is definitely become one of those hallmark events for the series in terms of fan attendance.
Yeah.
It's an event. And as you said, St. Pete, Arlington, Mexico, Long Beach, Barber. Then you go to the Indy GP and the Indy 500. Like, you're looking at 7 races, your first 7 races, and then you get into championship talk, at least for us, after that.
Yeah. Not until
you get into that stretch, and then you still have Detroit and Road America and Toronto, and hopefully Iowa's back, and Milwaukee and Nashville and Laguna and Gateway, and
built that momentum heading into your biggest race of the year that you hope then propels you into the second half. And I think there's one thing to be said about NASCAR starting with the Daytona 500 is some people say, well, you have your biggest race, the first race of the year. That's weird. But you know what it does? It sets the precedent of your biggest race, and it captures people. And then the hope is they continue to tune in, because every year I'm like that. Maybe not as much last couple of years, but back when I was semi in NASCAR, you'd be like, all right, Daytona, great, I'm watching that. Oh, next week they're at Phoenix, cool, I'll tune in. And then it kind of builds on itself. Now, it either dies out when you start watching the other races, you're like, this is boring. But at the same time, Daytona is a huge event that people tune in for, and then it can carry you in to the rest of the season, or at least the early portion of the season. As much as I like St. Pete, love St. Pete, it just doesn't have that excitement in terms of on track that continues to get people. So when we're talking about reasons why 50% drop in viewership, part of me is saying St. Pete wasn't riveting. So those people that otherwise would have been captured for the next race didn't tune in.
Also, a lot of people say, well, despite the nearly 15 laps, 20 minutes lost of the race on the Fox broadcast for Thermal, well, but did people tune out? No, they actually tuned in because of that, because you had 829,000 viewers at the peak for the race in the final 15 laps, like the final quarter hour or so of the duel between Palou and Lundgaard and Pato O'Ward. So people tuned in after the mess was the TV. So let's run through the numbers. So Cup on FS1 got nearly 2.5 million viewers. Xfinity on the CW, which is also network, 1.16 million. NASCAR Trucks, 906,000. That was on a Friday night. F1 on ESPN in the middle of the night.
This is the mind.
3 a.m. Eastern. 3 a.m. Eastern. Midnight West Coast. So I get that young people stay up later and there's F1 fans but this blows my mind. 824,000 people watched F1 on cable in the middle of the night. Then you have IndyCar with 704,000, which was down from last year, 788,000 on NBC. NHRA, which got 669,000. And just to continue the craziness,
add insult
with that, you look at what the Professional Bowlers Association did
on what, Saturday afternoon?
On Saturday afternoon
on Big Fox.
On Big Fox. And this is crazy, but it got close. What was it, like
709,000 or something like that?
Or 638,000, okay. Yeah. So
same time as IndyCar, just a day before. Comparable, 100,000 off, basically.
Oh, wait, no, sorry. No, it beat IndyCar, 738,000. Now, it was won by Indiana's own and nearby Huntington's own, E.J. Tackett, who is a star in the bowling world, if you don't know who he is. But,
still,
that's tough.
Bowling, okay?
And thanks to S2000_Moose for pointing that out to us.
Let's not put IndyCar on a pedestal when it's getting beat by bowling on a weekend TV ratings.
On a Saturday
afternoon where there's basketball going on and more people are doing things on Saturday than Sunday, by and large. Okay, so that's why I kind of scoff at the people that say, well, Cup was going on at the same time and there was basketball on. Bowling beat IndyCar on the weekend. Bowling, people.
Now, wrapping up the broadcast portion, moving forward, like you said, you got to have a better second race. And having the week off, I don't know if that's as big as
No, I don't get it much into
people
that anymore.
want to say.
I don't think you can have a month break.
Correct.
But I don't think a 2, even 3 weeks is a big deal anymore.
I mean, a week off between the first race and the second race is probably fine. Going 3 weeks off, though, to Long Beach, which is in the exact same market, is puzzling to me. I get that you want to have a gap, but if you're not going to sell many tickets for Thermal as is, what's it matter, right? Just get back to it. So that's why adding Mexico City and Arlington, assuming they add both for 2026, will be helpful. All right, let's move on.
Sure. I will say in closing, for me,
yeah.
I do think Thermal has a place in IndyCar. It's just not on the regular season schedule.
And I would agree. I think Thermal is great for testing. It's great for spring training.
I mean, throw
preseason testing, I guess.
For a shootout.
An exhibition challenge, whatever.
Preseason.
I'm on board.
Yes.
But an actual points-paying race, count me out. I don't want it back on the schedule as a points-paying event in 2026. And to be clear, a lot of people saying, oh, the racing was solid, it was fine. A lot of you were complaining last year after this all-star celebrity whatever event they called it. And we were like, hey, let's see what happens. Well, we saw what happens, and we didn't like it.
Didn't like it, despite the racing being better than St. Pete. The
TV numbers don't lie. Right. I guess that's the takeaway for me.
Now,
the TV numbers don't lie. And yes, I get that IndyCar and NASCAR being on at the same time plays a huge role in that number. But there's always something. There's always something. And I think IndyCar would be better served to either do this as an all-star race during a weeknight, in the summer, or maybe not the summer, but, we talk about, and I know Kevin Lee's had this idea for a long time, IndyCar needs to run a race like the Thursday night of the MLB All-Star break in the summer. This is like that kind of event kind of thing to me where...
Yeah, bring in lights. They can afford it at Thermal.
Yes, true. So anyway, let's move on. What's your number two?
My number two, let's talk about Team Penske, because there was opportunity, as we mentioned earlier, with Penske struggling, that another team in Andretti and McLaren could come up and steal a win, because you're effectively eliminated 3 contenders in qualifying for this race. It was a good comeback for Penske outside of Scott McLaughlin, who, him and Devlin DeFrancesco had some, we'll get to that in a little bit, but just on Penske-like, anytime this happens, it's a story because it happens so little. So, yes, Will Power recovered, top 6. Yeah, Joseph Newgarden was able to get up, finish 13th. Scott McLaughlin taken out because he was racing towards the back to start, got caught up in some messes. But it was very un-Penske-like is what we saw, and very surprising to me.
Yeah, and with Scotty Mac, I mean, he had the collision. He said the car's fine. Devlin just ran right into me. That was pretty bad. But then they were running those blockers on the radiators.
Yes.
That's to help improve lap times, right? But the cooling.
Like Chevy teams were doing that.
Yes.
More.
Palou had no hybrid issues. Pato had hybrid issues for like half the race. Lundgaard did as well. Obviously, McLaughlin, his overheated. So this was a Chevy decision.
It was a Chevy decision.
Because you look at the 1-2 in qualifying for McLaren, right? But you look at the bulk of the top 10 who started this race, it was mostly Hondas.
Correct.
So Chevy took a risk. Look, we see this every year at Indy. The teams do different things, right? Honda's done it in the past where they've tuned their engines as on a knife's edge where it may blow up. We saw it happen last year. There's several Hondas blow up, but they want to give themselves a chance in the race. So, and sometimes that's worked out in their favor, like in 2017, and sometimes it is not, like in 2024. So,
I just don't know what Chevy was thinking with. I guess I knew what they were thinking with the blockers, and this is what effectively happened: is they didn't want. I think it was twofold. Obviously, if the engine runs hotter, you're going to be able to get more horsepower, and that's what Chevy was banking on. Plus, they were probably trying to keep dust out of the engine as much as they could. The problem was there were no cautions. So the engines were running at hard the entire race, full 65 laps. And I think that's what hurt Chevy is there was a lot of pressure being put on those power units and especially those hybrids with no cautions and those blockers on. And it ended up affecting Pato O'Ward, who said after the race, half the race he was without hybrid abilities in terms of an extra boost. So could that have held off Alex Palou? Probably not. But at the same time, Pato for 51 laps led this race and then lost by 10 seconds. And part of it was strategy, but also part of it was the setup with Chevy and the hybrid and their decision to use those blockers that turned out to be the wrong decision.
Yeah. One other thing we forgot to mention about the broadcast, final thing, the lead-in of the Bassmaster Classic. I don't know if that's helping draw in viewers, but anyway.
Oh, yes.
Nonetheless.
As much as, yeah, it doesn't help for sure.
But yes, I mean, teams took a risk.
Yeah, and that wasn't, I don't think, initially I was thinking, well, this is why they shouldn't be at Thermal. Look at these hybrid issues. But thanks to reporters afterwards, it was a decision, a setup decision that was the wrong decision by Chevy and particularly McLaren, and cost him potentially a chance at the win along with strategy. So it was a tough weekend for Chevy in general and Penske in particular. What about what are we at? Number 2 for you? Number 3 for you?
Yeah, number 2. Let's talk Alex Palou. We did a little bit, but he has now won 18.8% of his starts with Chip Ganassi Racing.
Gosh, feels like 48%.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? I mean, that's essentially 1 in every 5 races, if you're looking at extrapolating the math.
And the scary thing is, if you watch the warm-up, Chip Ganassi saying, well, he hasn't even hit in his stride yet, which is terrifying.
Right?
Now, is he just saying that to get dopes like us to talk about it and how scary it could potentially be? But he's still a kid at 27. The possibilities of this guy going down as not only one of the greats, but maybe the greatest IndyCar driver in history in terms of championships and maybe wins is well attainable. You think if this guy races another 15 years at the rate he's going, that's at least another 5 championships at this point,
Yeah. No. And again, we've talked about this before and made a bunch of Scott Dixon fans mad, but you're looking at a guy in his prime of his career, which you would have thought Dario was past his prime when he went to Ganassi. Still a really good driver, right? I mean, he won a championship 2 years prior at his final year in Andretti, but I mean, he went on a tear to close his career. Palou, as you said, only 27 years old. I mean, you look at the tracks, and yes, Penske should be good at Long Beach. Andretti should be good at Long Beach. I mean, McLaren should, but why would we count out Ganassi at any of these venues? I mean, Palou's on a tear, and when Scott Dixon won the first 3 races of 2020, that championship was over. Are we looking at a similar scenario here again with Palou? Perhaps. We'll find out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, seriously. So you look at it, and I think continuity is key with your crew chief, Ricky Davis. Barry Wanzer has been huge as a strategist. It's just, if they can keep the gang together, possibilities are endless at this point. And it's borderline frustrating because we're like, every season you go into it and everybody's talking about how improved they are, and as they should. And, 2 races in, here we are. Ganassi's won the first 2. Palou's won the first 2. Penske's going to get theirs. Andretti and McLaren have both had opportunities to win races and haven't been able to close. You're kind of looking at it again as you're like, here we go again with the top 2. But when we zero into Alex Palou in particular, what he's doing is absolutely astounding. It's not just him, as I mentioned, the team behind him. Barry Wanzer has been absolutely huge, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon, folks. The guy's just 27 years old. He's no longer really being considered in Formula One in those circles, unless he gets a hankering for NASCAR at some point. He's staying in IndyCar for the next 10 or 15 years.
And he'd love to go to Formula One, but due to his age, I just don't think that...
He'll be 57.
Yeah, I don't know if that opportunity will present itself, which is unfortunate. But, yeah, he's just been on a tear. It's been impressive, and it's been dominant. Like, yeah, he didn't lead a ton of laps on Sunday, but he cruised through the field on that final stint. I mean, Pato O'Ward was upset because he said we should have gone with used reds, and yes, he probably should have.
Right.
but I mean, Palou and Barry Wanzer got the strategy right, and that was that. What's your number 3?
Look, my number 3 is, let's talk about maybe after 2 races, it's too soon to talk about maybe things we expected that haven't happened and vice versa. But I look at teams like AJ Foyt Racing. We've kind of expected more in 2 races for Foyt. Santino Ferrucci finishes 14th, Malukas 18th at Thermal. I don't think have they had a top 10 yet through the first 2 weeks of the season? Did somebody finish in the tail end of the top 10? I don't think so.
No, they've not. They've been mid-pack both races.
So I know it's just 2 races, but that's a storyline to watch, I think, as we go into Long Beach and Barber before we head to Indianapolis is, okay, where's this, especially Santino Ferrucci, after the season he had, we expected that next step. Haven't seen it yet. How about Alexander Rossi? I mean, he's not competing for race wins, but back-to-back top 10s at ECR to start the season. I think that is, if you would have asked realistically what's the best case scenario for ECR and Rossi to start the year, a couple top 10s would probably be it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So they're there, and I think that's exciting to see. So I just think we're starting to put things into focus on some of these teams that came into the year expecting to take a big step forward. Foyt and Ed Carpenter Racing. And I think we're starting to see signs with Carpenter that, that influx of cash is paying dividends. And maybe Rossi has a new lease on his driving career here now. He says he feels much more comfortable than in terms of setups than what he ever did at McLaren. So could that be a thing? And then conversely, do we need to get to Indianapolis before we see Santino Ferrucci really hit his stride? But we kind of expected him to get off to a better start this year. Unsure. So I think it's some of those ancillary stories in the midfield and back that we're starting to say, okay, what are we starting to see come together here after the first 2 races?
My number 3, I'm going to go with Kyle Kirkwood. Solid top 5, right, at Thermal. He's been solid the first 2 races.
8th at Thermal.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's
running
5th
in
at
the
St.
top
Pete.
5 for most of
Okay,
them. Yeah.
8th at Thermal. But either way, a solid start to the season for a driver who I think just flies under the radar, period, who's uber talented. I don't think anyone's doubting that. A solid start. And then I also want to give a tip of the cap to Meyershank Racing. First double top 10 with both cars since 2022. I got to find the exact race that was. But I think they're a team that expects to get podiums and maybe challenge for a win this season. And I think pace-wise, that's continued, but they're getting the results now as well.
Yeah, and I think, through 2 races too, not a lot of destroyed race cars. I mean, other than Prema, with the fire that bit Schwartzman, we really haven't had any, especially multi-car demolition derbies, so to speak. So while I like the yellows to mix things up, and we've said it before, we like our crash fests here or there, for the bottom lines of the teams, it's been a pretty decent start to the year. They're not scrambling, having to get out new tubs and rebuild race cars too much, of course, outside of Prema, which still weird. And I think, I don't know who it was.
A fuel cell fire, right?
And I think it was Townsend Bell that said it in so many words, but basically you have a steep curve to learn as a new team in IndyCar, but you can't get the simple things wrong, like having a fuel hose loose and start a fire and effectively burn up the inside of the engine cowling and behind the seat.
And then he had the pit stop, right, where the tire wouldn't come off and it was just spinning.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to. Did they ever come back to that and say there was a penalty on that because you're not supposed to spin your tires while it's up on the jack, even though I don't think they were telling him he was still off the ground?
There's no penalty listed in the
which was
box.
Weird. Because, and I also, coming back to penalties, when did it change that if you run over the hose,
right,
it's not an automatic penalty? It's now
just a monetary fine.
Well, and it's also like if you're endangering somebody, then it's that's arbitrary. Like, who's to say what this and that is? Why? I don't know. Why make things so difficult? If you run over a piece of equipment in the pits, it's a penalty. Cut and dry. I thought that was pretty easy, but now apparently we've changed it. But I think we've had a relatively clean, knock on wood, first 2 races outside of some incidents, and I think that's been good to see.
Yeah, other final thoughts. I wish we would have seen more of Will Power's drive through the field. Didn't really get to see that, and I know probably a lot of it is just on strategy calls and quick pit stops, but if there was a way to see something like that, that'd be nice.
Right. Show movement in the field.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I wish we would have seen more of.
And it's interesting too, because some people want to say, well, it's Fox, they're getting used to it. Well, it's IMS Productions, right, that are part of it.
Yeah.
Like, they know their way around. It's just, and then graphical errors, Stingray McLaughlin type thing. They kept putting Palou when he was chasing Pato as third on the graphic.
When he was second.
The on-screen graphic following his car when he was second. Like those things, I was like, you're not new to this isn't the CW producing Xfinity, right? Brand new. Like, you have NASCAR. Like, what is going on kind of things. If it was NBC, people would be grilling them, right?
Yes.
So why should we have giving any less to Fox, because they've been around this before. They're not new to auto racing yet, some of these things. And I'm not, I'm not being overly critical. I'm just kind of more critical of the people that aren't being critical of the mistakes.
Also of note, we didn't cover this, but Colton Herta, the 26 entrant, not Herta himself, that I have to forfeit 10 entrant points, all prize money associated with the race. Andretti Global fined $25,000, failing to pass technical inspection after the race.
So no championship points is the big
Correct.
Thing.
Entrant points, but no championship points for Herta himself. Also, Wolfgang Monsieur was back at Thermal.
Back and annoying people, it sounds like, with his multi-questions.
Yes. So I have 2 questions. Was back. Trying to see if there are any other little notable things from Thermal over the weekend in terms of little nuggets. Oh, this. Apparently this was on the international feed, but not on the domestic feed. But Hinchcliffe was doing a Christopher Walken impression. I don't know if you saw this.
I did not see that.
There's a clip, Matzel89, MATTZEL89 on Twitter/X posted about a 30-second clip of Hinch doing this, and it was apparently picked up on the international broadcast, because remember, there was a brief moment where they came back, but there was no audio, and they cut to break, so I wonder if it was during that time. But yes, I thought that was funny. Also, YouTube TV, there was so much positivity going into this event. YouTube TV was promoting Thermal on their social media accounts.
How about that? I do too. I told you too, when I paused on YouTube TV, sometimes it would come up with an ad on YouTube TV. So activation, that's nice.
Yes.
Didn't really work, but
no, didn't work, but it was quite nice.
I also caught the warm up for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love the
like
laid back.
You don't need to cover every lap on track. Talk about the storylines. The sit-down interview, they did one with Ganassi, obviously, as you mentioned. For St. Pete, it was with Sebastian Oliver Weldon. I like the format. It's
relaxed.
Quick, 30. I mean, they're on TV for 22, 23 minutes.
Yeah, count commercials. It's not very long, but
it's quick.
Something.
But I like the format. Also of note, I guess we didn't cover this, but more details about Connor Daly's 76 deal. So it's part of a deal with Cyclone Next Gen, which has a licensing agreement with Phillips 66 to use the 76 brand at 400 travel centers it's building around America. So that those details from Adam Stern. So there's the tie-in. So I would expect both those entities to be on Connor Daly's car for Long Beach as well, just because of their base in Southern California. So there you have it.
There's
a look at notes from Thermal.
Yeah, I did miss Jamie Little.
Yes.
In the pits. Jack's still learning his... I mean, he's fine. He's just learning. I just think 2 sometimes isn't enough to cover 27 cars in the pits, And I saw today Georgia Henneberry joining Jack Harvey and Kevin Lee in Indianapolis. and getting some photo ops there. So maybe she'll be back come Long Beach. I don't know. But really missed. I missed a third pit reporter, and two, I missed Jamie Little because she's just phenomenal.
Absolutely. All right. If you agree or disagree with us, and I'm sure a lot of you disagree, we'd love for you to let us know. You can find us on social media, on Twitter/X, and on Instagram. IndyCar Podcast is the handle. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. You can message us on there. You can also email us, newtrackrepodcast@gmail.com, and support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. And as always, download and listen on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Mailbag time, and Justin, it's of course a doozy. I've tried to whittle stuff down a bit.
Well, do we do rate the race?
So rate the race first.
Okay.
This is tricky. So I've calculated our average. Now,
do we want to give ours first before we calculate average?
Well, I have it in my phone. But
okay.
In terms of, I don't even know how to, like, on one hand, and someone replied, and we'll get this, they said incomplete, which I understand, right?
Yeah.
Because the broadcast issue, but the racing on track. So again, my baseline's always a 5, right? If there's a race, it's a 5. You have a pass for the lead, that adds a point. You have good racing towards the end, I'll add a point.
How many points are taken away from missing 12 laps of green flag?
Yeah, that's the issue, right? From a pure racing perspective, and I'd probably throw in another half point or so just because, I mean, is an improvement on track compared to St. Pete. Taking away the TV element, I'm looking at like a 7.5. St. Pete, I think I gave a 6.5.
Okay.
So obviously I thought this was a lot better.
Yeah.
But I also factor in the TV coverage, right?
Right. Or lack thereof.
Yeah, I guess I have. Was it better? I mean, when you factor in the broadcast, even with things going away, but the on-track product was clearly better. So is it still overall better than what we saw at St. Pete? I don't know.
You can't put it better when we missed 1/4 of the race. Effectively, or 1/5 of the race. I had it. If you're just judging it based on track action, I have it a 7. I have to take away probably 3 points for the issues. I have it as a 4.
I have to take away at least 2, so I would go 5.5.
So when we take all encompassing, I have a 4. You have a 5.5.
Yeah. Now the average on Rate the Race from our listeners who responded was a 6.2.
Go higher than both of us.
Yes.
Then.
But I can't discount. I have to factor in the broadcast as part of the overall package. Because we do that for every race.
Yeah, we have to.
So in terms of what people had to say beyond, just a number, and I thought it was good, and I got to find it here because I'm sure it's going to take me forever. But the fact of it's an incomplete, and we don't know what Thermal's future holds. They were going to meet Thermal officials with IndyCar after the race. This was a story that came out on Racer prior to the race. So we just don't know. But in one of our listeners, OK Shatan, probably didn't say that correctly, but was at the race, posted a picture, sent it to us in the grandstands. But I don't know. And Jeremy from HBG, here it is. Incomplete. Good in run, though. If you've ever been in charge of an org, you know there is one thing coming for the man in charge right now. Who's getting fired to make sure something like this doesn't happen again? A message has to be sent.
You have to hope they're taking it as seriously as they should. I hope so. Whether that's track related, whether that's series related, whether it's production related, I don't know. But they got to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. It shouldn't happen once.
No.
Let alone again. And then again, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, to then go to NASCAR as opposed to putting the 500 on. I mean, in the event of a weather delay, you would hope that they'd put the 500 on. Or sometimes, the previous year's race at that location, which obviously is more difficult because Fox doesn't have rights to many races. But you do it for a weather delay. So a power delay, you would think you'd put the 500 on. But I don't know. It just made things worse having to watch stock cars go around.
This is an update from last week's episode about the trading cards. This from Lynn_IndyCar. The $260 is the 2025 Pronto subscription. Cards from each race. You get all 17 events. They sell each week for $12 too. Regular 2025 set should be able to be pre-ordered in a couple weeks. They'll have hobby boxes and retail packs as well. So that's the update.
So you can pay for a season worth of cards where you get them all?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't...
I guess.
But that, I don't think that includes like the specialty cards, does it? Or like, I'm sure they have somewhere like 10 that have a brick in them or something.
I think it's like a full box set.
Box set of all the normal cards.
Probably.
Yes. And maybe
this was a positive story. So Bozy Todorovic, again, apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly. I know the name, very popular on social media. But Honda's Chuck Shifsky said on recent conversations with IndyCar, quote, when I made the comments I did in December of 2023, it wasn't going as well, and we didn't feel as though we were being heard. We're definitely being heard. Continuing on, he goes on to say, I think that's a good thing. I think for Honda and for the teams, IndyCar has to be sustainable, not in the green sense, but in the financial sense. And so I think the series has to work on that part of their world, making the series appealing.
I felt like the first half of the quote made me feel pretty good.
The second half, not so much. The second half,
you're kind of like just brought back down. So my feeling hasn't changed whether Honda's coming back or not.
But at least it's something in a better direction. Jeff Cerneski said, I'm glad to hear something positive on Honda's continued participation in IndyCar. Hopefully the new TV contract and new events will continue the momentum. And that's something, again, IndyCar's got, not only does Arlington need to be as advertised, but you have to add Mexico City, right?
Yes.
You just have to.
Yes.
And Lynn_IndyCar said this sounds more positive than a year ago. Key is finding a third OEM that will stay more than a year. Yes. Again, that continues to be.
Could be saying that for the last 15 years.
Right.
10 years.
Right. Elsewhere on the mailbag, again, plenty of entries to get to this week, so we've narrowed things down as best we can. Let's see. This is on. So Mom 2X over 2002. I talked about the truck issue. Said if you haven't listened to this past week's track sides, this would have been last week's. With Kevin Lee, suggests you do. All new media trucks were built, still working out the kinks, which again goes to my point of. But why are you working out the kinks?
But here's the thing. Let's pretend the NFL tried to use that excuse.
The NFL did have a power outage at the Super Bowl.
That's true. And it hasn't happened again.
Was that a Super Bowl on Fox?
But it wasn't a broadcast one, right? It wasn't a broadcast.
Well, it was a halftime show.
Right. It was an outage at the location,
stadium.
not the broadcast.
Yes.
But I'm saying let's take the NFL, for example. If they had an issue, or let's say the Super Bowl issue, did they come back and say, well, we got new trucks. We're still working the kinks out. Like, that doesn't fly. If it doesn't fly, and people say, well, the NFL is so much bigger. Yeah, it is, but the approach should be the same. Like, that's not an excuse, okay? So don't use it as one. We're still working the kinks out. We're still missing multiple laps on our broadcast of green flag racing, but we're working on it. We'll figure it out.
This from
They're
Xander.
Just lucky that nothing happened.
Yes.
Big.
And it was CBS had the broadcast. I looked it up because I was curious. Xander_Ridge. Question for the next episode, if you guys are into it. Why did it take so long for Palou to get by Lundgaard, but Award was relatively easy? I think it's tire choice. I'm not sure what tire Lundgaard finished on. I don't recall. But Pato was on primaries.
Yes.
Also, he got caught in lap traffic.
I think that was the big thing, too, is he was able to catch up to him much quicker. I mean, once he got past Lundgaard, within 2 laps, that lead was from 10 seconds down to like 2 seconds. And it was he had clean air to catch him. And then B, I think it was Pato starting to dabble into traffic as well. So once he got by Lundgaard, it was over. And I don't know, maybe just Lundgaard made it more difficult being a quote unquote good teammate, maybe as well. But he passed Lundgaard with like 14 to go, and then passed Palou or passed Award with like 12 or 11 or 12 to go. It didn't take very long to get past them.
No. This from Unlimited Slip DF. When a certain Toowoomba native is told pre-race by a time traveler that power will be the media headline coming out of Thermal. And it's Jack Nicholson nodding. Thought that was funny. Elsewhere, so positive on TV numbers for Thermal is the practice on Friday. 168,000 viewers on FS1. Granted, it's more in prime time. It was way up from the, what was it, like 95,000 at St. Pete?
Yeah, there's just no rhyme or reason to these TV ratings.
Yeah, I mean, it's up because it's a better time slot.
Right.
I mean, pretty simple. So that's a positive. Okay, let's get into primary reason IndyCar Thermal TV rating so low, and majority of you in this poll that you posted said Cup and Hoops. Cup/Hoops, 68%. Not a good event, nearly 19%. Other, nearly 11%. St. Pete, not exciting, 2.5%. Looking at some responses here. Nifty Car 52. All these contribute, and some of them are just fact of life and shouldn't be accounted for when making a schedule. However, the fact that a third of the race wasn't televised, I think that's got to be the biggest reason. But again, the highest rated portion of the race was the end.
Yeah.
So TLJ1724 said, I'm a McLaughlin fan. Turn off after lap 2. There's not going to be a good result combined with an awful track and broadcast combination. No reason for a neutral to go watch. This was interesting. Zoko Chinchi, and this is translated from, I think, Spanish. But at maximum potential, from Portuguese. At maximum potential, a little of everything, but to reach a decent number, the reason is the season schedule. A lack of promotion outside of Fox's control and digital media, little ambition regarding expanding the category. I think most people still thought it was proof of a million. Bleh. So again, translates a little rough, but I get it.
Bits and pieces of them. But
bits and pieces. 500, Indy 1911, just this is simple. IndyCar cannot go against Cup as 100 on Fox, and it doesn't make any sense why they would do that. Bassmasters was the lead-in for IndyCar, and they could easily move that recorded program earlier, move IndyCar to noon. Rich people love drinking mimosas at 9 a.m. on their balconies overlooking Turn 9.
That is very true, the latter part. But here's my thing, like Fox is already doing IndyCar a tremendous favor by broadcasting all 17 network races. It doesn't need to continue to bend over backwards. Eventually, here's my thing. Eventually, IndyCar has to be self-sustainable to be able to bring in a considerable amount of steady viewers, no matter what is on, what it's against, what's before it, what's after it. We always try to find excuses on this was going on and here was the lead in and this was after. IndyCar needs to get to a place where it doesn't matter where it is. It's getting 1.5 million viewers per race. And if it can't, then you have to wonder about the long-term sustainability of the series. Like, you can't blame Fox. It's just...
There, like you said, there are factors, but overall, you eventually got to get numbers.
Yeah,
and in defense of Fox, as long as they come through on not scheduling races at the same time, that helps. But you're only looking at a small segment of the Cup schedule. You still have the Prime portion, the TNT portion, and the NBC portion.
Well, and I think too is not many IndyCar fans want to think this way. But what's the best time for Cup? Why should Cup move when it gets more people to watch than IndyCar? They want to put Cup, which is consistently getting more viewers, on at the most opportune time. It doesn't owe IndyCar anything other than the fact that it's putting every race on network. Fox is going, yeah, we have this deal with IndyCar. We have to put stuff on FS1, but we're going to put it at the best possible time for NASCAR to get the best possible rating. Okay? So you're not going to have the network bend over backwards for IndyCar that's bringing in less viewers at the expense of a series that is getting more viewers. Okay, we always hear it on one side as well. The network has to do this to move stuff around for IndyCar. Why?
The network has done IndyCar a favor.
Yeah, and they're not bringing enough ratings to get favors. They have other stuff getting better ratings that's on at the same time.
Now, the Indy 500 they'll treat
correct
differently, and
should.
And if there's another event that they discover, outside of St. Pete, obviously being the first race, If there's another event on the schedule that gets a massive number, I mean, look, Mid-Ohio is going to go straight up against NASCAR. Gateway is going to go up against NASCAR.
Right.
Barber is going to go up against the Masters. There's always something, right?
Right. But you know what?
Long Beach, sorry.
Where was Cup even at? Homestead?
Yeah, Homestead.
Like, if Homestead, if the track is saying, hey, because a 3:00 start or 2, it gets humid down there. They want it early in the afternoon, right? They don't want to start in the morning. So that time slot works the best for that race at Homestead. Sorry, IndyCar, but this is what works best for the NASCAR race that we're also broadcasting. So people love to throw that, move everything else around. How does it affect those things, some of which are getting better ratings than IndyCar?
Multiple people said need an option for multiple reasons or all the above. And then Poet Shevchenko had this to say, my coworker, who is an even bigger F1 fan than I am, didn't watch the Chinese GP because he was watching March Madness all weekend. Again, March Madness is always going to be a draw for a lot of people,
right?
Regardless.
Formula One still brought in a lot of viewers. Even if it was several people that recorded it and watched it the next day, it still counts.
Yes.
Right? So, yeah, you could point to, people were taping Formula One. Well, there weren't a lot of people recording IndyCar then that watched it later or the day after because it didn't factor in the rating.
No. Elsewhere in the mailbag, this was, again, posted about the F1 thing here. S2000_Moose, IndyCar should keep quiet about ratings at least until the Indy GP. Long Beach is going up into the final round of the Masters. That audience will likely dwarf to audience for Barber going against NASCAR at Texas and F1 in Miami. And then Gateway, NASCAR's in Mexico City and F1's in Canada. So it's just the nature of the beast, right?
Yep. You got to be able to pull a decent amount of people watching when other things are on.
Brady BC3 said, I'm not overly concerned about this number. I believe the significant event will be Long Beach. IndyCar's second largest event should attract a substantial crowd. Viewership is below 1 million. Then it might be time to be concerned. Look, we're 2 races in. We had a really high and a really low. So it's a good point. What will Long Beach get? We shall see. I guess that will be kind of a better marker, and we'll get to the end of this. We'll have 19 data points because we'll have the 2 Fox Indy 500 qualifying windows, and we'll evaluate. We can't be all doom and gloom because of one bad race.
Can't be all excited after one race.
Correct.
The first one,
Correct. It was a good start.
I feel like
a bad race too.
Yeah, I mean the average. I feel like we're going to have more. Maybe not as low as Thermal, but we're going to have more Thermals than we're going to have St. Pete's, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then Zoko Chinchi had this, and I think this is really good. Again, translated from Portuguese, so bear with me. I know that Mark Miles and Penske, so are you afraid about the international race? But the public wants a good race with good space for fans. I want at least 2 ovals, but it seems impossible today. But choosing Thermal just because it is possible is making IndyCar small. Thought that was an excellent point.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, we mentioned it before. Just it has the feeling of a small race. It doesn't feel like an event. It doesn't feel like that for very many people on the ground because there aren't very many people there. Definitely doesn't on the broadcast. And it was almost like having the drone shots, which are cool, exacerbated that fact. There's just nobody there, it just doesn't feel like an event.
And then you had posted almost 15 laps of which we couldn't watch. Again, talking about Graham Ray Hall, who was defending the race. And we couldn't watch due to a heat-related issue at a private track. Hardly no one could attend, where 99% of us never be able to afford to live. Thermal is a loser. We had a couple people.
Is that too direct?
Yeah. a couple people who complained. A few people with better points than just simply complaining, saying, oh, you guys are too negative. Run_Mark_Run said the housing affordability of a track location should have no impact on viewership. If wealth bothers someone, upper level motorsports is probably not for them.
I will say it shouldn't, but I guarantee you it does. I just feel like when you tune in and you're kind of like, it's different than like Monaco and Formula One, like I said, because that is elitist. But IndyCar is supposed to be this for normal people. and it can be easily attainable in terms of getting tickets and going to races. It's supposed to feel like North American racing is supposed to feel like for the people, right? NASCAR does it too. It's just that it's just really, I would say blue collar, but it relates to us commoners, and it's tough to watch that race and relate to the commoners. I know people will say, well, with millionaire owners and all that stuff. Yeah, I get it, but at the same time, it's supposed to feel like every day, you can go to any race you want. You can sit anywhere you want. You can see the cars up close. It's just very, very open, and Thermal's just very, very closed.
Jay Blasteri said, solid race with some drama, passing strategy, and lead changes. Much better race than St. Pete. Unable to watch 15 laps, unforgivable. If Thermal wants to increase length of track, add more grandstands, and pay a fee, give it another chance. Tony Vogt said it beat out the 2 complete snoozers at Iowa last year. Fair.
It did.
NK Harden, I don't get the complaint about the lack of fans making for a negative TV experience. Has anyone ever turned a race off because there weren't enough people in the grandstands?
I have watched races and just kind of, lost just the feeling of an event.
I don't do that for IndyCar, but I will say this. I have a hard time watching Xfinity because they're racing in front of like 2,000 people.
Yes. Here's an example in another sport. We're both big college football fans.
Yes.
Maction, it sounds great, but if I tune in and there's nobody at a game between Western Michigan and Ohio University, I'm kind of not going to watch.
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
It's hard to get into. I agree.
I absolutely feel that there's an impact on that. I mean, I think you look at some of the best basketball games, football, yes, I absolutely believe it. If it doesn't feel like an event, then I'm not as inclined to tune in.
And then this from Kojo617, going to disagree on this one here. Circuit breaker failure. It happens, not a big issue. The tire strategy coming together at the end was fantastic. Not every race is passing like Indy in 2013. Power marched the field. Was it a banger? No, but it wasn't awful either. And then added said, had folks decided it was bad and disaster before the race weekend even started? Probably. And I would push back and say, I had not. I was looking forward to this event. I saw it, and the broadcast issue that factors in probably the bulk of my opinion.
Right.
But that's because
it's important.
It's a due diligence thing is the way I see it.
Like if you're going to have a blown circuit breaker, do it at Iowa last year so we didn't have to watch.
But thanks to everyone for submitting tweets. We have so many others that I just got to move forward in the episode because we're getting bogged down. But obviously, again, thanks as always. Tweets. I do have a bunch
of people. I mean, it was a polarizing event for sure, but we appreciate everybody chiming in either on Twitter and X or online or sending us messages. Just keep it coming. We appreciate everybody's feedback,
whether they like it or not. And then this one more message. It's from Ron from North Carolina. The hate isn't justified. This via newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Guys, all the shade being thrown at the Thermal Club race this past weekend is unjustified. Yes, the Fox broadcast could have been better. We all agree on that. It absolutely shouldn't have happened and can't happen again. But I, for one, think we should give them a mulligan. Wasn't thrilled when Fox took over, but given their investment in promoting the series, I think we should hold back on heavy criticism. NBC had the rights forever. It didn't do half as much as Fox has already. As for the race itself, what was it lacking? The track was technical. If you missed your apexes, you paid for it with position and time. There was a dramatic pass for the lead and plenty of action throughout. Could there have been more passing? Sure, but I thought it was a solid event that deserves to stay on the calendar. Since it's a new event, the date can move around, though. Obviously, racing there in the summer isn't ideal. Let's take a step back, see the race for what it was, and remember it. We've seen far worse races in the past year and a half. Also, add a PS, it's good to have Devlin back in the series. More for controversy.
Man, I mean, appreciate the email for sure. I mean, for Devlin to feel like he had a reasonable argument to go at Scott McLaughlin about that move was astounding to me. I guess, going to defend yourself to the end, but especially after the race, you had 65 laps plus cool down to really kind of put things in perspective, and he still came out swinging at Scott McLaughlin. I would have felt by then he comes up to you and you just be like, yeah, my bad. Like, I screwed up. No, man, he wasn't ready to admit anything.
let's go to news and notes as we've gone so long and we need to start wrapping things up. First off, some breaking news while we were recording. This is exciting, not just for IndyCar, but racing as a whole. Did you see this? MAV TV has been acquired and will be rebranded the Racer Network. As
Wow.
Racer Magazine, now print, web, and a television outlet. Super
I
exciting.
don't even know if I get. Do we get Mav on YouTube TV?
Yes, I believe we do. So, I mean, this is super exciting to have a true,
an
IndyCar show, perhaps.
IndyCar show?
Yeah. So, some details on this. I mean, obviously, this was just announced, but I mean, obviously, they're going to have racing, right? So, the TV network and recently launched app will combine and broadcast 300 plus live races in 2025, race highlight shows, racing talk shows, additional racing programming, car collecting, auction and build shows, automotive documentaries, and lifestyle series. All in all,
I mean,
super
auto
exciting
racing shows, that sounds like IndyCar, right?
But yeah, I hope we get an IndyCar show. I mean, hey, do they bring back Wind Tunnel? I don't know, but super exciting. But aside from that, let's get to other stuff in the mailbag. And other exciting news, also broken by Racer, is that Tino Belli is going to lead the IndyCar future chassis design. Now, he's already on the team, but he's leading the meetings now. Full write-up on Racer.com. This is nothing but good news.
Kind of question why he wasn't involved in the first place.
I mean, he was involved, but now he's
when it basically came
heading
about
the project
after the initial unveiling in November or October, whatever it was. And the feedback they got back is they're like, well, Tino Belli has developed race cars before, been involved. He's the aerodynamics guy effectively. So let's allow him to lead this charge. And in terms of the story, at least the rendering doesn't sound like we have any full-size cars yet, but the new renderings are a lot more aesthetically pleasing per people that have seen them as opposed to the, let's say, 1.0 version. So that's good to hear. Aesthetically pleasing is only one aspect. If it doesn't race well but looks good, it doesn't matter. So, but this is a great development. Tino Belli, very intelligent, been around racing and IndyCar, especially for a long time. It's going to be it at least shows that Penske's listening. And sometimes I think we feel like they aren't listening. And I feel like the paddock definitely can say that same thing. Doesn't feel like they're listening. In this respect, Penske Corp is making it right with IndyCar and adding Tino Belli to the team.
Elsewhere in the series formerly known as Indy Lights, Sophia Florsch and HMD Motorsports have parted ways. So she just had one
Quicker
race.
than Liam Lawson.
Yeah. Feeder Series Americas says it was made on budgetary grounds. A driver for the number 24 to be announced later. IMS, they now have new leaderboard panels atop the pagoda that are functioning. So that's exciting. There's testing at the road course and an announcement by AJ Foyt Racing today as we record on Thursday, March 27th. They partnered with the Alzheimer's Association. They'll have elevated placement on Santino Ferrucci's car for Long Beach. So that's cool. Also, speaking of IMS, camping for the Indy 500 sold out 3 weeks earlier than a year ago. Obviously, ticket sales have been brisk as well, something to monitor. The country concert, is set for the night before the Indy 500. Midland will be the concert, and that is at White River State Park, the amphitheater there, the night before. Also, speaking of the Indy 500, Dogecoin, which is sponsoring Devlin DeFrancesco, Blaze is the livery winner.
Which is what you voted for.
Yes,
right?
I voted for Blaze. So you can check that out on their social media channels, Ray Hall's social media channels. I'm excited to see that car. It should look pretty good. The IMS Fan Fest series across the state of Indiana starting off this weekend. Evansville's Franklin Street Tavern and Bud's Rockin' Country Bar and Grill coming up this Saturday, March 29th, 5 to 8 Central Time. Because, again, Evansville, Indiana's weird. Evansville and Chicagoland on Central Time. So that's where that is happening. Also, coming up on Sunday, there's the trading card event. We've told you before, Marcus Armstrong, Connor Daly, Marcus Ericsson, Jack Harvey will be at Indy Card Exchange this Sunday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. With that event, full details you can find on IMS social media, also Indy Card Exchange as well. So a couple things to rifle through. And one other note coming up this Sunday as well. The Can Cinema in Indianapolis is doing a series called Bricks and Flicks and winning the 1969 movie starring Paul Newman. There will be an intro and Q&A with Jake Query, the IMS Radio Network. But this will air this Sunday at the Can Cinema, 5 p.m. in Indy.
Very
there
nice.
You go. A few Indy 500 IMS related items on news and notes. Also, one other thing, Scott Pollard, former Indiana Pacer who underwent a heart transplant, but he has been named the Grand Marshal of this year's 500 Festival Parade.
Skunked again, you and I.
Yeah. And then Tyler Wong, 65, just sent us this, but the 2021 Indy 500, where Elliott won his fourth, that will be re-aired tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern on Fox Sports 1.
Hey, keep that in the bank just in case we have another circuit.
Yeah, right.
Put that on.
Right. And with that, there's one other note, and it's this story from Nathan Brown of the Indy Star on IndyStar.com. Now, he had posted this, and this quote I found, or this nugget I found fascinating. At Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Racing, Christian Lundgaard said he only studied his own data.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Because that's what he wanted
to see.
To see?
I mean, he wasn't studying his teammates' data. I found that fascinating.
That is odd because, you know, the old adage, the more cars, the more data points, and you can compare and contrast. So,
but didn't want to share notes with Ray Murray Hall and Takuma Sato, at least for the Indy 500, and Jack Harvey and others. But I found that fascinating.
Okay.
Interesting decision. With that, time for tweets of the week. And
what do we have?
We have several. Nathan Brown of the Indy Star. Your Fast Six, this was for Thermal. A Ganassi driver who backed out of a McLaren contract. So that's Alex Palou.
Yep.
2 McLaren drivers, Pato Ward and Christian Lundgaard. An Andretti driver who was offered a McLaren ride and once drove for Ganassi, Marcus Ericsson. A former McLaren driver, Alexander Rossi. A one-time McLaren F1 test driver. So that would be Colton Herta.
Man.
Indy 44 posted, and it's a billboard of Pato pulling down. It's the video is superimposed in the billboard. This is so cool. But of Pato Award pulling down the sunglasses and doing the wink, but on a billboard.
Very cool.
Hickey 93. What did you think of the Thermal broadcast? And it's the Alex Palou meme from the ad. My kid hated it. Thought that was great. Good Ranchers got in on the Scott McLaughlin Devlin DiFrancesco beef and said, beef sponsored by Good Ranchers.
That was
good work, brand.
Good. Yes.
David Malukas had posted new pre-race routine. Did you see this video that went viral on social media?
I don't think
of the guy who wakes up at like 3:52 a.m. and would dip or dunk his face in a bowl of ice water with Saratoga, like springs.
No, I didn't.
Spring water and ice cubes, and would do it like several times, and then also like rubbed his face with a banana peel. So anyway, he posted a picture of a cup of ice.
I think I saw that, and I had no idea what it was.
Yes, and a banana, and said new pre-race routine, and then came back after, said didn't work. So a lot of tweets, a lot of good stuff, making fun of different things, but all in all, good segment of tweets of the week. Anything that we missed before we get to our random split air driver of the week? We've covered
Thermal
plenty
ad nauseum. I think we're good. I think you and I are ready to move on from Thermal for this year.
Yes, we are. All right. Who is our random split air driver of the week for this week?
Well, there's one thing that was fertile that we wish we still had in IndyCar, and that's the amount of Japanese drivers that would appear here and there during the split era.
Tor Takagi.
Naoki Hattori.
Oh.
As we're going with today. Now, Naoki Hattori, at least with his IndyCar career, his IRL career, he spent 2 years in Indy Lights in 1997 and 1998 for Team Green. Okay. Then he was in kart for, 8 races in 1999. He started the 1999 season at Homestead, Miami, and finished 25th in that race, sponsored by Marlboro, by the way, that 1999 race. Then he appeared later in the season, had a best finish of 14th at Laguna Seca that season. That was a 20-round kart season that year, 1999.
That was peak kart, like 99 to 2001 prior to the Texas race being canceled and the California race also being canceled due to wildfires.
Peak kart. So actually has a...
peak kart post-split, to be clear.
Yes.
Peak kart was probably like 1985 to 1992 or so.
That's true.
93, I guess you got to include 93 with Mansell.
But Naoki Hattori, a lot of Japanese experience. Started in Japanese Formula 3, Japanese Formula 3000, Super GT, which he did after kart, some touring cars as well. Actually did Indy Lights, like I mentioned, with Team Green those 2 years. And let's see, had a best finish of third at Tres Riviere.
And also Long Beach.
In Quebec. And Long Beach, and had a second at Toronto.
I would love for IndyCar to race there. Is it
Tres Riviere?
I mean, it's not a big market, I understand.
Yeah.
It's a cool looking track.
Yeah, it is pretty.
I would love for there to be 2 to 3 races in Canada. That's just me.
I would agree. So, but interestingly, after he won the Japanese Formula 3 championship in 1990, he failed to pre-qualify for 2 Formula 1 Grands Prix with Coloni in 1991 as a late season replacement for Pedro Chavez. He raced in Indy Lights in the mid-90s, like we mentioned, kart briefly in 99. And in 1997, he tested a Formula 1 prototype, the F105, for Dome F1 at Suzuka, but Dome F1 never entered a Formula 1.
I've never heard of that team.
Me neither. So after that, again, got into touring cars and all that. Actually, still around as actually a motorsports journalist. Still 58 years old, a native of Yokachi, Japan. Mr. Naoki Hattori, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
And I forgot there are 2 nuggets from the mailbag that I did not get to that I found fascinating.
Yes.
First off, Catherine Legg, Marshall Pruitt says she has sponsors, crew, and engine to make another run of the Indy 500, but missing a chassis.
An important aspect.
Which
doesn't sound promising because it sounds...
Make it make sense that this car is this old, and you have a driver that has everything. All you got to do is you need a chassis. And I get people say, well, she finished 29th last year. Okay, is she not more qualified or as qualified as all these other drivers? Like, it's not about her. Right. I mean, she's a talented racing driver. I just think it's ridiculous.
And a healthy sponsor.
Everything is ready to go from what we've read, unless something's missing here. Everything's ready to go. You have a chassis that's, 13 years old? But yet, she can't find it. I hope she gets a ride, because I think it's ridiculous.
Soon, you know?
Yeah, it's got to happen by Long Beach, basically. I think it's ridiculous that everything's ready to go, but she can't get a chassis. And teams are saying, oh, we're not going to run another car.
Come on.
If a driver is coming with a sponsor that's going to pay for a lot of costs, I think it's silly.
But again, the teams want to compete against themselves to qualify.
Didn't used to be an issue, right?
I know.
And suddenly it's become an issue in just the last 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, I understand.
I think it's silly. And then there was one other note that was fascinating that talking about hybrids. And Dave, this is on page 4 of the mailbag, emailed in and said, just read an article on the internet saying that the powers that be in Formula One are considering dropping the hybrid in the next engine regulations. The reason is a high cost that manufacturers are not as enthusiastic as they used to be. They want to return to pure racing engines and lighter race cars. I was shocked to see this 180-degree turnaround. If true, the aftershock of all series specifying hybrids would be tremendous. Maybe the reason IndyCar can't get a third OEM is that manufacturers really don't want to invest in hybrids in the future.
It was so behind on hybrid technology that it's already going out of the hybrid.
Yes. And Pruitt says, we have a winner. The tides do appear to be changing the auto industry. And if that proves to be true, what you've read on the good old interweb is where racing will be headed. I thought that was a fascinating little nugget that I definitely had to pass along.
IndyCar teams would not be faster to rip out that 105-pound hybrid unit and make their cars significantly lighter. If you told them right now, within 10 minutes, you'd have teams ripping them out of the back
and save several $100,000 per entry per year in the process.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the future, but just hybrid came in too late.
All right. Finally, this wraps up a marathon episode. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. We move on from thermal. Next week, we'll talk all things IndyCar. Hopefully, some interesting news breaks between now and then. But that does it. Thanks for joining us on another edition of New Track Record Podcast.